Hi, I'm Mike Overly, author of Bass Encyclopedia. This is Guitar Forum 2.0. Welcome back. Tonight's lesson is going to be a bass lesson, and what I would like to cover in this lesson is how to play 2 octaves on a 4-string bass. So let's begin by the definition of an octave. An octave is the same letter that has a different sound. So what we mean by that is that an octave has 12 sounds, but these 12 sounds have 21 letter names. And the reason why the 12 sounds have 21 letter names is because there are 7 natural letters, A, B, C, D, F, G, and then every natural letter can be sharp, so there's 7 sharp letters, A sharp, B sharp, C sharp, etc. And there are 7 flat letters, A flat, B flat, C flat, etc. So taken all told, we have 12 sounds with 21 letter names, 7 natural, 7 sharp, 7 flat. Now, when we begin by saying that there is a way for us to learn where those 21 letters are on the fretboard, then fretboard flashcards would be a really good thing to learn the locations of the letters, because everything in music is contingent upon finding the letter, and what we'll see in this show tonight, calling that letter tone 1, and then that becomes what we call the key letter. Now, the first angle that we're going to start with in tonight's show is going to be just a straight edge angle, a horizontal angle, say for example, string 4. Now, the 12 sounds of the octave are understood on the bass as being the sound at the nut, which we call fret 0 when we play it, and that would be the letter E. So, letter E is on fret 0. Now, when we add 12 frets, then that 0 plus 12 takes us to fret 12. Now, in most bass books, they'll say that that location of the 4th string is also called E. But if we do it that way, then we find that we have a problem, because we have 2 E's. And somebody says, hey, play me E, and you go, which one? So to solve that problem, there's a symbol solution to it. And what we find is that that E at fret 0 is E, but when we play the octave 12 frets apart, we will now call this E, E prime. So that's an octave. So now we have E at fret 0, then 0 plus 12 is 12, and that is the sound of E prime, and that's the sound of the octave. So even though they have the same letter in that certain sense, they have a different sound, a low sound and an octave high sound. Okay, now when we deal with that octave situation in a horizontal way, then we find that it is actually 12 frets apart. But now when we turn into forms, which we call on the bass, which designate that you're going to find that letter on string 4, you're going to call it tone 1, the first sound, and so therefore the letter of tone 1 is called the key, like we said earlier. So if we go to G on fret 3, then we would find that we'd make the sound of G with the 2nd finger, and that would be 1. Now we find that an octave has 12 sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And those would be the 7 tone numbers of the first octave. Now, once we get to the first octave of 7 tone numbers, then to create the first sound of the 2nd octave, we then say we'll take the first octave tone number and add 7 tones. So now what we find is tone 1 plus 7 gives us tone 8. And tone 8 then is the octave in a different way, this time vertically rather than the horizontal. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now those 7 tones plus 1 giving us 8 then continues on. So if 1 plus 7 is 8, then 2 plus 7 is 9, 3 plus 7 is 10, and 4 plus 7 is 11. So we have this 8, 9, 10, 11. And herein lies our problem on the 4-string bass, that the highest tone number that we can play in this vertical grouping of tone numbers is tone 11 in circle 4-2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then that becomes problematic when we want to now play 2 octaves, as we'll see in a moment. But let's go back to that octave of tone 1, G. And now, if we take G and do the horizontal 12 frets apart, then we'll get to G prime on fret 15, because 3 plus 12 is 15, and that's the octave. And that octave now becomes G and G prime, but now we know that we can also give it its tone number name, so G is 1, and now that G prime is 8. So now we have 1 and 8 in a vertical form way, or we have 1 and 8 in a horizontal tone way. So G and G prime is 1 and 8 vertically, or it's G and G prime, which is 1 and 8 horizontally. So there's 2 different ways for us to deal with this octave. Now 1 and 8 is a very important tone because that octave is the beginning of many things. Pythagorean harmonic series, where you would say, I'm going to take the first sound and then I'll divide the string in half and I create the octave, and then continue on with other harmonics, and that's a different show. So the idea now is we take this 1 and 8, the octave, and now we can move it to different letters. So tone 1 and tone 8, which would be G and G prime, or we could go to A and have tone 1 and tone 8, and B flat and tone 1 and tone 8. And now one of the most popular modern techniques of bass, started like simply with Louis Johnson, would be that you would what we call slap the bass. So you slap that tone 1, and then you put your finger underneath the string and you pull outward and you pop. So you have a slap, pop. And that became the basis of funk and disco. That kind of sound. So just like there's a circle 4-2 major scale, there's actually 7 forms of the major scale. And those 7 forms are found in Bass Encyclomedia on page 37. Now the reason why I'm pointing out page 37 of Encyclomedia is because it actually illustrates the 7 forms of a major scale on the bass. And by looking at that page, what you will notice is that there is no form on the guitar, or on the bass guitar, that actually has 2 octaves inside one vertical grouping. So what that means is that there's no way to play a 2-octave scale, whether it's major or minor pentatonic or anything, on a vertically grouped way in the bass. So that leads us to our next concept of how are we then going to create a 2-octave, let's call it a major scale for our example here, on a 4-string bass. So now we already know that tone 1's octave is tone 8, whether you get it vertically in a form or whether you catch it horizontally on one string. And then, of course, it goes further, like we said, from 8, 9, 10, 11. But that's as high as you can go in that particular form. So what we need to do now is go to the next octave, and therefore, since we're adding 7 tones, we have tone 1 plus 8, and now we have to have tone 8 plus 7, which would be 15. So the question is, where's that at and how do we get to it? So the first workaround is, if then tone 1 on G is found an octave higher, 12 frets apart, and it now becomes G prime, and we now know that that's tone 8, well then we can now play these tone numbers 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And now what we've found is we've just taken the circle 4-2 major scale that if we start on G is tone 1, it gives us 1 through 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now we go to G prime on fret 15 and have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So we find that we can actually create octave tone numbers incredibly simplistically because the circle 4-2 fingering, let's call it now, remains the same. It's just you're moving to a different location, and this location would be an octave, and therefore you'd have octave tone numbers, and that way you get from 1 to 8, and now you can get from 8 to 15, and that's your 2-octave scale on a 4-string bass. The concept of that, though, is that 12 frets apart concept is actually, let's call it a great distance. And that great distance, as Einstein told us, time is space, would take you a lot of time to get that much space. So what we now do is say, let's shrink the space and quicken the time by presenting the concept that closer is faster. So now what we're going to do is we're now going to introduce the concept of unison. Now, we've already done unison, but we didn't talk about it because we want to use it in this closer is faster way, because we're going to change the form. So now we have a circle 4-2 major scale. There's tone 1, and now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now this G prime is now going to be found in a different location on the bass, and that's going to be the G that's found on string 3, fret 10. Another case for getting back to the fretboard flashcards, know where your letters are. But in this case, this G, which is actually G prime now, tone 8, sounds the same as this G prime in this location. And if you make the same sound in a different location, you call that unison. So now what we can do is, instead of taking the octave by displacing 12 frets, tone 1 goes all the way up to fret 15, tone 8, now we can have a closer target, and now we'll target that tone 8 G prime on fret 3, and that's closer. So now we have a tone 1 in circle 4-2, a tone 8 in circle 4-2, and now we're going to play the unison G prime on string 3, fret 10, and that would be G prime, tone 8, and now our 15 is closer. So now we have 1 and 8 and 8 and 15. And then that 8 and 8 is the unison, and the 1 and 8 is an octave, and the 8 and 15 is another octave. That's your 2 octaves. So what we have is 1 and 8, that's a diagonal angle. Now we have this diagonal angle going from 8 to unison 8, and then we have another diagonal from 8 to 15, and that's what I call the Z angle. If we look at it like this, it's 1 diagonal to 8, and 8's unison angle, and then the 15, and that creates a Z angle. And that's the way I think about it, and that's the name of the lesson, bass, Z angle for bass, octaves, and unison. So now what's the point? The point is we need to connect these scales to make it smooth 2-octave scale. So now what we're going to do is we're going to target that circle 3-2 G. Now the important part of this is we really only have to target one location, and that makes thinking about the bass fretboard so much more simplistic. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the circle 4-2. We target now what we call circle 3-2, because now we have our second finger on the third string, and that's that G prime tone 8, and now it's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So by only targeting the one location, the G prime tone 8 on the third string, we get a smooth 2-octave scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And that is how you play a 2-octave scale, major in this case, on a 4-string bass. Now when we play backwards, we now target a different location, because now we're going 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We'll actually play 8 this time and target now the tone 7 of that circle 4-2 major scale, and now target 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we have 2 targeting location. On the ascend means to go higher, we target that tone 8 on the third string, but when we descend means go lower or backwards, we target tone 7 of the circle 4-2. So ascending, we're going to target tone 8, When we descend, we're going to target that 7. And that's how you play a 2-octave major scale, ascending and descending as efficiently as possible. Efficient meaning less energy, and less energy is less space and less time and all those sorts of things. So that's really what the Z-angle concept is all about, is to be able to do something on the bass efficiently that would otherwise be impossible, really, or way, way, way less efficient. For example, what bass players, and lots of bass books and guitar books too, do is they'll take like an 8, 9, 10, 11, and then they'll teach you to just like crawl up the one string to find your sound you want. Well, that's as inefficient as you possibly could play the bass. It makes the sounds, that's true, but this crawling up like that is certainly not the same as that smooth and efficient connection of forms. Okay, so what we found was then in that circle 4-2 that the highest tone number in circle 4-2 is 11. Well, that becomes problematic for many, many, many songs, as we'll see in this next set, because tone 12 is an extremely important tone number when you're playing much more melodic orientated on the bass. If you're just playing bass parts per se, then like we've done in other shows, you could have this tone row where you would have a 1, 3, 5, and tone 5's no problem at all. And in this case, a 6 and an 8, so you have that. So playing tone 5's no problem at all. But when you want to play that in the second octave and you go, okay, if 1, 3, 5 becomes 8, 10, 12, then you go, here's the 8, here's the 10, where's my 12? And you're back to your same problem. So this 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, 6, 5, 3 then gets targeted on the tone 8, and now it's 8, 10, 12, 13, 15. So it makes playing tone 12, in that case, 1, 3, 5, 8, 10, 12, absolutely simplistic. So the Z angle has many, many, many benefits. So let's apply it now to a simple melody that everybody knows, but it'll illustrate the point. Let's take the song Happy Birthday. The song Happy Birthday now has tone 12 in it. Now, therefore, that would be problematic for playing in circle 4-2 because there isn't any tone 12. So here's the concept. If we now, I got the tone numbers down here in case I can't remember what they are, but now we would say that the tone numbers of Happy Birthday go 5, 5, 6, 5, 8, 7. 5, 5, 6, 5, 8, 7. So far, so good. Next goes, it's 5, 5, 6, 5, 9, 8. 5, 5, 6, 5, 9, 8. So once again, no problem, everything's cool. But in the next line, it goes 5, 5, and the octave of 5 is 12, because remember, tone numbers are add 7 tones, so 5 plus 7 is 12. So now it goes 5, 5, 12, 10, 8, 7. So since now we could play 5, 5, but we don't have a 12, we wouldn't be able to play the song. So what happens now is we have a totally new concept, and that concept is now the octave, which we now know is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and that enables us to play the 12. But do we really want to play 5 down here and 12 up here? Probably not. That's not very efficient either. So here's the next insight. If we now go to the tone 8 on the 3rd string, what that really does now, that tells us that we've actually got one more string that we actually can play on. And this is highly beneficial for many reasons. The first being what we're talking about now, I can actually now descend from tone 8 and now have an 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So I actually got some of those first octave tone numbers up here that we've been dealing with the second octave. but this is kind of like a bonus because now we have a bonus as a reward for achievement. So we got a reward here, a bonus, because now we got this circle 3-2. That gives us an extra string to play on, the 4th string. So now we can have our 8 like we always had, and now we have the 7, which is 1 fret lower than 8, and now we have 6 and 5 and 4. So therefore what we can do is we can play our tone 8, and underneath it on string 4 is tone 5, and tone 5's octave, 5 plus 7, is 12. So now when that line of Happy Birthday goes 5, 5, 12, 10, 8, 7, 6, now we can play 5, 5, 12, 10, 8, 7, 6. So now we can play that third line of Happy Birthday by going up to the octave location, but realizing now we can play those tones that are lower than. So now it finishes off with 11. Now, of course, we could go back to circle 4-2 and play 11, 11, 10, 8, 9, 8. Or we could stay up where we were and play our tone numbers 8, 9, 10, 11, and now play 11, 11, 10, 8, 9, 8. So the entire Happy Birthday song could be played starting in circle 4-2, but you'd run out of tone 12. So in this case, what you would do, you would shift the entire song up to the octave location, and since you have those lower tone numbers than 8, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, so now we can play Happy Birthday in the circle 3-2 location because we have not only tone 12, but we have the 5 that's lower than 8. So now we have 5, 5, 6, 5, 8, 7, 5, 5, 6, 5, 9, 8, 5, 5, 12, 10, 8, 7, 6, 11, 11, 10, 8, 9, 8. So we find that it's possible to play the entire Happy Birthday song in the circle 3-2 location because circle 3-2 gives us those sounds lower than tone 8. So this whole concept that we have tone numbers that are lower than tone 8 because of the bonus string, this is an awesome thing because one of the most basic bass parts in songs is simply just tone 1, which generally speaking is, let's just call it the letter of whatever chord you happen to be playing. So if we were playing a G major chord, then the bass player would play G. If you were playing a minor chord, then the bass player would play A. But since the bass player would like to play more than one sound, then the next tone that gets played in bass is tone 5. So the concept is you'd have a tone 1, a tone 5, tone 1, tone 5. But the concept of this is that you have a tone 5 that is higher than 1, so your bass line goes up. Moving it to other letters, the 5 is going up. But the bonus of the circle 3-2 is that you can have not only, well, first of all, you can have a tone 8 that is the same as tone 1 an octave lower, but now because you're on a 3rd string, now you can consider that G, and there's the 5. So now you can have, let's say 8 that goes to 5, goes down. Or you can play 8 to 12 and have 5 go up. So you can have your bass parts go up to 5 on the 4th string, and on the 3rd string you can have your bass parts 1 and 5 go down and up. Then what you find is that you can begin to add the octave of 1, which is tone 8, and now we can have a 1, a 5, and an 8. Now of course, we can now play on the third string, and now this becomes 8 and 12 and 15. But it's still the same concept of that, quote, 5 in its octave going up, but you can also have it going down and then up. So you have a lot of things that can happen based upon the fact that when you start on the third string, you can go down to 5, or you can go, quote, up to 5. So you have 1 and 5 on the fourth string. You still, on the third string, can have this 1 to 5 concept, which is really 8 to 12. And then you can have it go down. This leads us into real songs like My Girl. And then what we find is My Girl actually uses that. Now, My Girl's in the key of C, so here's your C. Now, this time that C, which we have learned is 8, is now going to have that 8, and then it goes down to 5. Then it plays 8 again, and up to 12. Could do that, but what made My Girl sound cooler, Jamie Jamerson, so it gives you those two directions, down and up, and then, of course, in the famous riffs that go along with that particular song. Another concept now that happens on that 1-5-8 is now we can play in circle 4-2. Now in this case, I'm actually changing the form only because I'm changing the finger, but that's really not a part of this lesson. So let's just say that we're playing tone 1 with our first finger. You could play it with any finger, it wouldn't really matter. It changed the form, but it wouldn't change the sound or the tone number. But this time I'm playing my first finger so I can do this technique. I'm going to play 1 and 5 and 8, and all that was in the circle 4-2 area. Now what I'm going to do is have that 1, 5, 8, and then slide up to the circle 3-2 area of the G prime in that case, and play that 12-15, and now I get kind of sounds like 8 Miles High. Bird song. So that will take care of tonight's show. That shows you, various aspects of the bass, and most importantly, the very fact that it is possible then to play 2 octave scales, octave range, on a 4-string bass. So I hope you enjoyed that, and until next time, I wish you the best of all good things.